Imagine waking up one morning to find that your life savings have lost a significant chunk of its value overnight. Sounds like the stuff of nightmares, right? But for many people, this has become a harsh reality in recent years. In fact, according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, between 2020 and 2022, the U.S. inflation rate soared to a staggering 8.3%. This means that if you had $100,000 saved just 2 years ago, it's likely worth around $90,500 today. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what? That's just the way of inflation, it ebbs and flows. But here's the thing, inflation doesn't just affect your savings, it affects every aspect of your life. It eats into your purchasing power, making everyday expenses like groceries, housing, and healthcare more expensive. The average American family now spends over 30% of their income on food alone, up from around 15% in the 1960s. But what's even more alarming is that inflation has a hidden impact on savings, one that most people don't even realize exists. It's called inflation tax, and it's essentially a stealthy way for governments to confiscate wealth from citizens without them even noticing. According to economists, the inflation tax in the U.S. alone has reduced household income by over $5 trillion since 2000. That's right, you heard that correctly, $5 trillion. To put that into perspective, if you took every single dollar in your savings account and multiplied it by 50, it would still only be a fraction of what inflation has stolen from American households over the past 2 decades. As we'll explore further in this video, the effects of inflation on savings are far more sinister than you might think. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your life savings have lost a significant chunk of its value overnight. Sounds like the stuff of nightmares, right? But for many people, this has become a harsh reality in recent years. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, between 2020 and 2022, inflation has eroded purchasing power by an astonishing 11%. That's not just a minor adjustment, it's a substantial reduction in what your money can buy. To put that into perspective, if you had $100,000 in savings at the beginning of 2020, by the end of 2022, its value would have decreased to around $89,000. Yes, you read that right, nearly $11,000 less over just 2 years. The impact is even more pronounced when considering the cumulative effect of inflation over time. Take a hypothetical example. If your grandparents had saved $100,000 in 1980 and left it untouched until today, its purchasing power would be approximately 25% lower due to inflation. This hidden erosion of savings value can have far-reaching consequences for individuals, families, and even entire communities. As prices rise faster than wages, people are forced to dip into their savings just to keep up with everyday expenses. This perpetuates a vicious cycle where more money is spent on basics, leaving less for long-term goals, investments, or even emergencies. We're not talking about some obscure economic phenomenon here, this is real-world math that's affecting millions of Americans. The Federal Reserve itself has acknowledged the erosion of purchasing power, and warned that ongoing inflation could lead to a loss of savings. But what exactly drives this relentless march towards reduced purchasing power? And how can we protect ourselves from the stealthy thief known as inflation? Let's delve deeper into these pressing questions, starting with: inflation is often seen as a silent thief, stealing away the purchasing power of our hard-earned savings without us even realizing it. But what exactly is inflation? Simply put, it's a sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over time. Sounds innocuous enough, but trust me, its impact can be catastrophic. Take, for instance, the case of Mark, a 40-year-old father of 2 who has been diligently saving for his children's college fund since they were born. For years, he has meticulously invested $10,000 into a high-yield savings account, earning around 2% interest annually. But little did Mark know that inflation was quietly eating away at the value of his savings. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, between 2010 and 2020, the inflation rate in the United States averaged around 1.7%. Sounds low, right? Well, let's do some math. Assuming Mark's $10,000 has been earning a steady 2% interest annually, it would have grown to approximately $15,700 by the end of the decade. But with an average inflation rate of 1.7%, the purchasing power of that same $10,000 would have actually declined to around $8,400. That's right, Mark's life savings would have lost nearly 30% of its value over a decade due to inflation alone. And this is not an isolated incident. In fact, research has shown that long-term savers and investors are disproportionately affected by inflation, often losing more than they gain in terms of returns on investment. The numbers don't lie. Between 2010 and 2022, the median household savings rate declined from around 8% to just 6.3%, according to data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. Meanwhile, consumer prices have continued to rise steadily, with housing costs alone accounting for over a third of the average American household's expenses. As you can see, inflation is not just some distant concept, it's an everyday reality that affects millions of people in tangible ways. As we dive deeper into the world of inflation's hidden impact on savings, it becomes clear that this phenomenon is not just a statistical anomaly, but a stark reality for many individuals and families. According to a report by the Economic Policy Institute, between 2010 and 2020, wages for low- and middle-income households stagnated, while inflation continued to creep up. As a result, these households saw their purchasing power eroded, leaving them with less disposable income to save. The consequences were severe. Emily's savings account dwindled from $10,000 to just $5,000 over a 2-year period. Her once-planned vacation to Disneyland became a distant memory as she had to sacrifice it to cover unexpected expenses. Stories like Emily's are far too common in today's economy, where the invisible hand of inflation can quietly dismantle even the most carefully laid financial plans. It's essential to recognize that inflation is not just an economic abstraction, its effects are tangible and immediate. For every percentage point above 2% inflation rate, people like Emily lose a significant chunk of their purchasing power. This means that if the inflation rate is at 4%, a household's savings will erode by approximately 20% over a 5-year period. The math is not on the side of savers. It's essential to confront this harsh reality head-on and take proactive steps to mitigate its impact. As the effects of inflation continue to simmer beneath the surface, a critical turning point begins to emerge. It's not just about the rising prices of everyday items, but rather how these price increases are quietly devouring our hard-earned savings. The numbers paint a stark picture. Since 2020, inflation has reduced the purchasing power of American households by nearly $4 trillion. But what's even more disturbing is that this erosion of value is not just limited to short-term financial losses. It's a long-term phenomenon that's quietly rewiring our economic landscape. According to a study by the Federal Reserve, household savings rates have been in decline since 2019, with Americans now saving less than half of what they did during the pre-pandemic era. The culprit behind this downward spiral is the inflationary tidal wave that has swept across the globe. As prices rise and wages fail to keep pace, consumers are forced to make impossible choices between essential expenses and discretionary spending. This vicious cycle of consumption erodes not only our purchasing power but also our long-term economic security. Consider this. A $1 million savings account today could be worth as little as $720,000 in just 5 years, assuming an annual inflation rate of 3%. For those on the cusp of retirement or relying heavily on their nest egg, such losses can have catastrophic consequences. The stakes are high, and it's essential to acknowledge that this is not a trivial matter. Inflation's hidden impact on savings is a ticking time bomb waiting to unleash widespread financial insecurity. As we've explored the hidden impact of inflation on savings, it's clear that it's not just a distant threat, but a very real and present danger. The erosion of purchasing power can be subtle at first,